Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Retirement Redefined. I'm Brad Gatto, and in today's episode, we're diving into the idea of early retirement, in quotes, what it really means, and the top three things that you need to think about if that is, in fact, on your radar, which I'm assuming it's hopefully on a lot of people's radars. Whether you're dreaming of an early exit or just advising someone else who is, this conversation is going to be packed with insights. But don't also forget to subscribe and join us bi-weekly for our practical advice and fresh perspectives on planning the retirement you actually want. And here with me, as always, Miss Carly Carlson,
Hi,
the
everyone.
CEO of Get Tax. How are you, Carly?
I'm doing really well, thanks. Yeah, life's been good.
Okay, tell me more. Why
Yeah.
is it good?
Well, we've been on an adoption journey in our family, and we've had our foster daughter with us since May of last year, and we just got our adoption date actually from our
Really?
social worker. Yep, May 15th. So
Congratulations.
she'll be with us almost a year, and
That's a
we'll have
that's a huge deal. That's
it's a
awesome.
big deal. Yep,
Would you say May 15th? I didn't hear
May
you.
15th.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Well,
Yes.
congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, it's
I don't
really
think I
exciting.
can. I mean, I don't think I can top that.
Oh, come on, you gotta have something. What's something
Uh,
big in your world?
I don't, I work. I know that sounds ridiculous and it's kind of, but I love work right now. We're really busy, but I love being busy and I love a lot of the things that we're working on and continued, you and I in this kind of marriage of the wealth management world into the tax world. I'm excited that tax season's over so that you and I can sit down and have
Yeah.
some meaningful conversations about that kind of stuff. But the other big thing in my life right now is we started another, a second kind of phase to home renovation. I don't like anything under construction, and our home is under construction again. And I'm attempting to teach my 15-year-old how to drive. So like outside of work, it's all about,
Life's full. That's
yeah,
full. Yeah.
yeah. It's for any parent that's out there that has kids old enough to drive, or maybe for some of you, this was years and years and years ago when you taught your kids how to drive. It's stressful.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say. It's just stressful.
Our 17-year-old, when he started to learn to drive, my husband just said, he was like, just don't drive with him. Just don't even get in the car. Like, just don't do it. It's fine.
And that is the other problem
But
is my wife and I are very different drivers. And so
yeah.
he's getting very different advice from my wife than he is
Yeah.
getting from me. The poor kid doesn't know his head from his tail right now and who he should listen to. And
I
when
mean,
we're
that might have
both
been
in the
Noah's
car with
PC
him,
reason.
yeah,
That might have been Noah's PC reason for telling me not to drive with Wyatt. Like, just
I've just requested to sit in the back. And I was like, you know what? You just sit up front with him. I say this to my wife. You just sit up front with him and you control how he's driving. We don't both need to tell him how to drive. So I don't want to be a backseat driver. So I just sit in the back and we do our deal. But anyway, enough of that. What people really care about, Carly, is how in the world can I retire early? So let's first of all define early
Mm.
because early is relative, right? And so for today's episode anyway, and what I think if you were to read articles on Yahoo Finance or Barron's or places like that or the Wall Street Journal, I think our definition is going to be pretty close to theirs, and that is age 65. And there's reasons for that, right? Because when you think about
65 doesn't sound super early, as a
I
number.
know,
Yeah,
but when you think about life expectancy with this
sure.
generation, it is like if if you think about the average, I saw, and this is a little bit of this is a pre-COVID statistic, and so I know it's changed a little bit, but it's not materially different.
Mm.
A married couple, age 60, has a joint life expectancy of 94. Here's what that means. There's a
Wow.
50-50 chance that one of the two of them is still alive at age 94. Because life expectancy by definition is the coin flip, heads or tails,
Yeah,
right? 50%
sure.
chance you die before that date, 50% chance that you die after. And if you're perfectly average, when you flip the coin lands on the side and you die right on that date, right?
Mm.
Um, Married couple, 50-50 chance, one of the two of them makes it 34 years beyond the age of 60. So if you retire at 65, now you're talking 29 years. So it is early relative to or in my mind, it's not old
Yeah.
because even their parents, the generation before them, and if you go back even two generations, their grandparents, the baby boomers' grandparents, on the whole, didn't retire. And if they did, it was for like 5 years, you know?
Yeah, that's
So
interesting. Your life expectancy and your retirement date were much closer together.
yeah, because they retired later and died earlier.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was both. And so now what we're for our show, we're going to say pre-65. You want to retire early,
Okay.
pre-65. And there's some pretty stark lines in the sand. And that is Social Security is kind of a common thing to look at as relative to early, late retirement. Now, technically you can take Social Security at 62, but that's not your full retirement age as it relates to Social Security.
Sure.
That's age 66 or 67, depending on when you were born. But also at 65, you get Medicare. And health insurance being one of the largest expenses for retirees is usually a large determining factor in somebody choosing to retire, being able to afford to retire, that kind of stuff. And so knowing that kind of all the social safety net light switches are turned on for retirees with Medicare and Social Security. And if you do have a personal pension, that's usually by 65, you're fully vested and ready to go.
Yeah.
So early is pre-65. So now, how in the world do we, what are some of the things that our listeners need to think about prior to age 65?
Well, Brad, maybe I know you and I put together kind of three things we want people to think about if they're trying to retire early. But
Yeah.
before we dive into that, if someone wants to retire early, has a plan or a dream or a vision for how they want to spend out kind of their retirement years, how soon do they need to plan for that? Like, when does someone need to come to you or to the Fiat team and say, like, hey, my goal is that I'm going to retire? So if someone's 64, can they come to you? Like, what's the likelihood they can come to you and say,
Yeah.
I want to retire next year?
The best time is yesterday.
Well,
So,
yes.
um, it's a hard question to answer in some respects because honestly, I can think of, and if they're listening, they're probably going to know I'm talking about them. But I can think of a client that I work with, a couple that is about my age, and I'm in my 40s. So they're by normal accounts a long ways out from retirement. But there are decisions that we're making together today in how much they're saving and where they're saving it and how they're invested and the tax status of that money based on their future retirement. And so we're already laying groundwork for them by our definition, 20 years before they retire. And so it's important to know that whether you want to retire early or not retire early, it does, the decisions you make today, even if you're in your 40s or 30s or whatever, like it does matter. It does. Now, I know that's not exactly what you were asking. And so that was a shameless plug to, you should all be working with us yesterday. Or an advisor in general, but for sure us, because we're better. So I don't know that that flies with compliance. So I need to say that I'm joking. That being said, yeah, ideally, I mean, a year is kind of the minimum because when you start to because usually things need to change. We need to adjust some things. We need to adjust how investments are allocated from a risk perspective. A lot of times we need to move money around from a buckets perspective, for money that we're going to use in the next kind of 12 to 24 months, money in that 3 to 10 year bucket, and then that later bucket. Usually, and when you start to kick dust up like that, Carly, it can cause tax uncertainty. It can cause cash flow uncertainty in the short term. And so we like all that dust to settle down and kind of be normal before you enter into retirement. And so I would say at least a year would be really nice. Although we'll work our butt off. If somebody walked in my door tomorrow and said, I want to retire 2 days from now, we'll do what we can. But everybody knows that if the only time that you care about the plans of the football game or the last play of the fourth quarter, the odds you're going to win the game aren't very good, or at least you could have performed a lot better had you planned and prepared the whole game, right? So the other thing about that is we're going to talk about these 3 points. If you're going to retire early, and that even is a part of your goal, early, again, pre-65, there are considerations you should probably be thinking about. I'm thinking about, again, this couple that's closer to my age. That is going to define some of the decisions we make now, even at 40. And in fact, this couple, now they're really going to know who I'm talking about. They're actually one of my favorite clients. One of my favorite clients. The wife wants to retire yesterday, and they're about my age, and it's like a running joke in all of our meetings is, do I get to retire now? Do I get to retire now? And every single time her husband rolls his eyes. But so yes, they want to retire early, and we're already making decisions at their age. They're going to help make that happen. So let's give this away. What are some of the Why don't you lead us off? What are these three things we're talking about here, Carly?
Yeah, I mean, we've already hinted and alluded and outright said some of them, but so what we really want you to think about if you're planning for an early retirement, pre-65, there are kind of three major things you should focus on. And the first is healthcare. The second is Social Security and your benefits that you have kind of under this government pension that you've been setting aside money into your whole life. And then finally, your cash flow. You're not going to get a paycheck from your job anymore, and all of a sudden, you're going to have to figure out a different way to pay your bills. And so, we want to make sure that you are thinking through where does that money come from to pay those bills.
Yeah, so let's unpack each one of those. Let's go back to healthcare because
Mhm.
healthcare is scary. I mean, for a lot of people, when you think about, you just kind of get lulled into this idea that I have a job, I have healthcare through my job, and it kind of is what it is. And so, when people think about retiring, one of the first things that gives them pause or fear or you know whatever is healthcare because healthcare, if you are unfamiliar, is really expensive
So expensive.
on the whole, right? And so if you're going to retire early and you're not yet 65, you're not old enough to get Medicare. So you just walked away from, and for most people, an employer sponsored plan. I mean, if you're a self-employed business owner, you've obviously picked up your own health insurance, but you no longer have a business to kind of run that health insurance through. I mean, regardless, the health insurance has to change, right? And most people, especially if you're again worked as an employee somewhere, have never had to go out to the private markets and find healthcare. And so the experience of just knowing what to do, where to go, where to start can be daunting. Then the premiums they're going to tell you have to pay can be extremely daunting. And so making sure you have explored all options as far as how to continue healthcare coverage. Now, the private markets is one of the areas that you can go to. I alluded to that. Cobra might be an option for some people. If you're unfamiliar with that, it's just your ability to extend out your employer sponsored health benefits, your group plan.
Yep.
And so for a period of time, I believe, Carly, is it 18 to 24 months, 18 to, I think it's 36 months now. Actually, you can
Oh,
extend it
is it
out.
up
I
to
think,
36? I was going to say the 18 to 24.
yeah, I think somewhere in a recent,
Mhm.
one of the last couple
Yeah.
presidencies, I think they extended that out. I think it's 36 months. So you have the ability to extend out your employer sponsored plan for a couple to 3 years. Now, that's usually really expensive because
Yeah,
whatever
it's usually
premiums
pretty
you
expensive.
pay is not the full premium. And so if you're used to like, well, they just take $700 a month out of my paycheck and that pays for my family's healthcare plan. And then you go to file for Cobra and you're like, okay, it's the same plan. And all of a sudden they send you a premium payment. It's $1,600. And you're like, what? I thought it was $700 a month. That delta there or difference is how much of it your employer was paying for versus how much of the premiums you were picking up. But now it's all on you. You can keep the plan, but you have to pay all of it. So that can be a shock or a surprise for a lot of people. And a lot of times Cobra is not that efficient. I don't know what your experience has been with this, Carly, but my experience has been these group plans aren't cheap.
No.
And so you could go get like an apples to apples private plan with the same deductible, same coverage, same. And it's not $1,600 a month. It's like, I'm just making numbers up. It's something less than that for the same plan, but done on a private scale, which I think surprises a lot of people. Have you run into that?
I mean, I've run into it as a business owner trying to get plans for my employees, and group plans are more expensive, and I was kind of shocked. I thought it would be the other way. Like
Yeah.
law of averages, it would somehow be cheaper. So I was pretty surprised that like, wait, it's going to cost them less to go get insurance than it's going to cost me to provide them insurance as their boss. Yeah.
Uh, Funny enough, I went through the same thing with Fiat. I'm not
Yeah.
going to get into the details of how
Yes.
we do all that here at Fiat now, but I went through the same process. The other thing I think people need to be aware of is when you go out to the private world to get health insurance and buy your own plan, there are all kinds of different tax credits out there that you may or may not be eligible for. Most of them are for people that are still working. Most tax credits, I call them mountain climbers.
Hmm.
Most tax credits are for people on their way up the mountain, climbing the mountain in their working years. But there are some to be very cognizant of. This one specifically is a healthcare tax credit. Can you talk a little bit about how that works?
I'm talking about the premium tax credit.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you buy your health insurance through the marketplace and get kind of a private plan, when you apply, you have to tell them your expected amount of income for the
Yep.
year. And if your income is below a certain threshold, the government will subsidize the cost of your premiums. So they will reduce the premiums that you have to pay out of pocket. But like everything, there's always a true up that has to happen with your
Yep.
return. So then when you go file your return, you do have to put on your return, like, here's the amount of the subsidy I received from the government, here's what my actual income was. And then you might either get more money back or owe more money, dependent on where your income fell compared to where you thought it would be.
Yeah.
And a lot of the clients that we work with are over the income threshold, so they don't qualify for a subsidy, but it is out there. And if you're buying through the marketplace, you can absolutely see if you're eligible for it with your return, even if you didn't get the subsidy up front.
Yeah. So really important point you made there about you can basically apply for the subsidy ahead of time. So it's not like you have to come out of pocket for your healthcare premiums all throughout the year and then just wait to get the credit back at the end of the year. You can guess or estimate what your income is going to
Yes.
be based on that estimation, get the credit ahead of time so they help you pay the bill as you go. But just know, like you said, you got to true it up at the end of the year. And if you were way off in your estimate, it's entirely possible you might have to repay some of that subsidy that they gave you. But there's a practical piece of advice here, and that is that you should know the subsidy exists, that the premium tax credit exists. You should know if you're eligible or not eligible. It should be part of your planning. And even deeper into financial planning, as a retiree, now let's say you're newly retired, you're 60 years old,
Yeah.
you're onto the private marketplace, and you come in. We've been planning with you at Fiat for years, or maybe you're brand new or whatever, and your monthly cash flow or your annual cash flow needs 100 grand. Well, I'll make it simple. It's 120 grand. It's 10 grand a month. You tell us I need 10 grand a month to maintain lifestyle. That is way above the income thresholds to receive a premium tax credit. You're going to have to pay full boat. The federal government is not going to subsidize any of your
Right.
premiums. But, and this is big, just because you spend $120,000 a year on your lifestyle doesn't mean that's what hits your 1040. It can go both ways. We have some people, I'm just, again, making up numbers for concept's sake, that live on 120 grand a year that have way more than 120 grand a year hit their 1040. And there's various reasons for that. I'm not going to get into in this particular episode. We also have people that live on 120 grand a year that have way less income than that hit their 1040, um, and can actually have income modified adjusted gross income, if you want to be super nerdy about it from a government perspective, uh, to apply for this credit that actually receive it. So it's not about how much you need to spend that's going to determine what your tax bill is and what your availability to a credit is. It's what hits your 1040. And so that I'm not going to say any more about that because we're going to talk about cash flow as the third point, and I don't want to steal
Mhm.
all the thunder for that, but just know that there are options out there, whether it's extending existing plans you may have had access to, going out to the private markets, but also know that if you're going to go to the private markets, make sure that you pick up a plan that covers what you need it to cover. Okay, because one of the mistakes I see people make, Carly, is that the plan they picked up doesn't even like pick up the things that they already know they need. Maybe there's prescriptions that you have already, or you've got a knee replacement coming up, or just something like
Yes.
that. You just have these known health needs, and the plan you pick up just doesn't even cover that kind of stuff. That's a big miss on the type of plan you pick up. But then also the additional, I don't want to say this, the type of plan that you pick up and what it covers, and making sure that it jives with the income plan that you have, just so that the
Right.
premiums are associated. I'll just leave it there.
Right.
Um,
I mean,
Anything you
and
want
I
to add
think
there?
I was just going to add, we talked about extending existing coverage, going out to the marketplace, getting a private plan. I mean, the other options are if you have a spouse who's still working and you are retired, you can
Good
maybe
point.
get a plan through your spouse's work, get coverage through them. And then the other option I see have started to see more and more of is like health sharing agreements. So you don't have to dive exactly into how those work, but they're not traditional healthcare, but you pay a premium in and have like a group that kind of shares in the healthcare costs of all of its members. So it's a very non-traditional healthcare cost sharing agreement, but it is a way to kind of subsidize. And if you don't have major medical concerns, it can be a really affordable way. Like the cost in those is like a third of what traditional healthcare
Risk
premiums
is
would
higher,
be.
right? That
Yeah.
if you have catastrophic needs and things like that,
Right.
that it might be a problem. So risk and reward, but
Yep.
good to understand all of the options.
Yeah.
It's a really good point about the spousal coverage as well, right? Because if you and your spouse aren't the same age, not retiring the same date, that kind of stuff, also important to understand what the options are.
Yes.
All right, point number two. What was point number two again? Remind me.
Yeah, if you're looking to retire early, another major thing to consider is Social Security, and when you should start drawing on Social Security. So again, if we're retiring before 65, you're eligible to start taking Social Security at 62. We want to consider like what's the cost of that? Because
Yeah.
if we start taking Social Security at 62, I think hopefully our listeners have listened to our Social Security podcast as well.
Right.
Another shameless plug. But you're going to get your Social Security at a reduced benefit. And so the longer you can wait to take Social Security up to 67 or 66, depending on when you're born. But the longer you can wait to kind of get to full retirement age on Social Security, then you can maximize those benefits.
Yeah. Or maybe even
So
delay all the way to 70. They'll let you delay it
right,
even
right.
as far as 70. But so cash flow is really what I mean. The decision of not having access, maybe you retired before 62, and so you didn't have access to Social Security, which is a big deal. But even if it's in that gap between 62 and 65, you technically have access, but
Mhm.
just no one understand the impact of filing early.
Right.
Because Social Security is a big deal for all retirees. Like you've been paying into this system for your entire working career. Now you finally get to collect on it. And so making sure that you understand the impact of an early retirement, how that affects your cash flow of whether you have access to Social Security or not, and if you do, what that reduction looks like. And if you can and even should count on Social Security between the ages of 62 and for retirement age, or maybe you need to subsidize all the way to 70 because that's what makes the most sense for your family. Can you afford to do that? Just understand, the pros and cons of the decisions that you're making, and kind of the offsets that are happening based on this idea of retiring early. Um, Last one's cash flow. We've kind of alluded to some of this stuff, but there's a couple extra points that I want to make here, Carly, and that is one, in an ideal world, you asked me the question up front, how early would they start working with you yesterday, right? I'm going to go back to my example, the extreme example of this couple working with me in their 40s. One of the things we're doing right now and being very cognizant of isn't just how much they're saving so that they have the right pile, the right number to be able to afford the lifestyle that they want, but where we're putting it from a tax perspective. A prime example of that, if you want to retire early, let's say it's extremely early. Let's say you're a 55er,
Okay.
okay? And the majority of your money is an employer-sponsored plan. At what age can you pull that money out without penalty?
59 and a half.
Well, I'm 55. What do I do? It's a problem, right?
Right.
Like, and we've run into this. Now, there are some exceptions that if the money stays in the 401k, some 401ks allow you to take it as early as 55. But
Mhm.
again, relying on exceptions and understanding that stuff can be a little bit problematic. But at the end of the day, one of the things we're doing for this family, as an example, is we're saving a ton of money in an after-tax account that doesn't have the restrictions and qualifications that go along with what the government deems qualified money,
Mhm.
which are 401ks, IRAs, 403bs, 457 plans, even Roth IRAs fall into that category. You just got to understand the limitations of where you've saved your money. And is that, from a restrictions perspective, the best place to put it? And from a tax perspective, the best place to put it? And so building your assets out in such a way that they're not only invested based on you retiring early, they're positioned in accounts that allow you to retire early, and from a tax perspective, give you the story that you want. So another example, we alluded to healthcare and this premium tax credit. I don't know what the exact numbers are off the top of my head. I'm not going to put you on the spot. Do you have any? I mean, isn't it 70 to 80 grand is where you're fully phased out, or 60 grand, or what is it?
Mm,
Do you know?
I don't know
I'm going
offhand.
to put you on this.
No.
Whatever. Let's just, the number is whatever it is. You're
Yeah.
fully phased out. You can live on income that doesn't hit your 1040. Like if you're
Right.
living off of principal, as an example, out of a brokerage account, or out of principal out of a Roth IRA, or just out of your checking account or whatever, and that's subsidizing some of your investment income, we can make your 1040 look like the IRS wants it to look to get a premium tax credit. And that can, that subsidy can be a really, really big deal. I mean, my mom is on a subsidy and her premiums are supposed to be $1,100 a month. She pays $50 a month. So she has $1,050 a month subsidy from the federal government to help pay for her health care. This is the last year. She turned 65 this year. But for the last 3 years, that's the way it's been. That's a big deal. It's a lot of money.
Well, and thinking about that cash flow and going back to point number 2 about Social Security, I mean, taking Social Security early might reduce your benefits, but also if you take Social Security early and then you also have to supplement your cash flow from the Social Security with other like taxable accounts, you've got to take money out of a traditional IRA or a 401k that's taxable if you're 59 and a half, or you are having to generate capital gains or take investment income and live off of that. Now all of a sudden your Social Security becomes taxable. So now you've lost cash flow because you've taken something that shouldn't, if it was just by itself, wouldn't have had any tax on it. And now we've added tax to your bill and reduce our cash flow anymore. So just the interchange between all of these buckets, all of your streams of income, where you pull from and when.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. We could go on to that about that particular point you just made for probably 7 hours.
Yes.
We will not do a filibuster version of a podcast. And so I think this is just a great place to kind of leave it. And I want to summarize it by saying this. If you're going to retire early, the planning should be different. It should look different, and not just, I need more money, because I'm going to quit work earlier. So obviously I just need more money. That is way too simple of a thought process. There's a lot of things to think about. And so if that is a thought that you have, we would love to talk to you. We would love to plan with you and help you understand all these kind of extra things you should probably be adding into your thought process, and not only give you the ideas what you should be thinking about, but help you solve for some of those. I don't want to call them problems, because they're not problems. They're only a problem if you don't plan for them, right? But just plan for the known things that are out there. So anyway, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Retirement Redefined. Carly, thank you so much for your insights. I love being able to hear from, a tax-driven side of things. And I think our listeners benefit from it greatly as well. So thanks for being here with me again for this episode. And listeners, don't forget, like, subscribe, share, do whatever you got to do. We're here to give away as much free education as we can. And every time you share an episode with somebody else, hopefully you can plant a seed or make an impact in what they've got going on financially in their life. And so we appreciate you doing that as well. Until then, enjoy your week, everybody, and we'll see you back in a couple weeks.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to click the subscribe button to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guests and does not necessarily represent the views and opinions of Fiat Wealth Management. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.